Hi, everybody.
Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Alrighty. Okay. Hi, everyone. That's a neat background, Wilf. I like the graduate one too. All right, 1 minute.
Hi, John.
So how you doing?
Good.
Mr. Chair, Director Johnson sends her regrets today.
Okay. All right. Well, that's 1:30. So I think we have a quorum. Okay, I think we do. 1, 2. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is 7 or 8 a quorum? Because I have 7.
Would be 8. I believe we've got 14 total.
Okay, we may have to wait a bit.
I think.
Okay, so me, John.
There's 8.
There is 8 now, I believe.
You just can't see Rochelle.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I there was a traffic incident that I had to stop and help, so I didn't quite get to where I wanted to be for the meeting, so I don't want to be distracting because I'm on the move, but I'm here.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's the one I didn't see. Okay. All right, then we can kick off then. So we'll call the order at 1:31, and we will recognize that we're conducting our business today on the territories of the First Nations of Vancouver Island, specifically in the New Channels, but we're all in different areas. And so before us, we have an agenda that has one slight change, which is a request for a bylaw and process that would be filed under item 8J. Is that correct, Wendy?
It actually will be under 9.1A. There's 2 pieces. So there's there's one under 9.1A for consideration of a late item, and it's correspondence from Mr. John Adams respecting agricultural land reserve application AB 2001.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have another late item under the section you just mentioned, 8J.
Yeah, added material for local government meetings and bylaw processes.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I just got to turn my.
All right, so we'll have an item added to 8J, which is added materials, and 9.1A, a letter from John Adams. Okay. Are there any other items to add to the agenda? If not, we can move the agenda as amended.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Coots. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. Any further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, any declarations? Conflicts of interest or gifts exceeding 250? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next is item 4, the adoption of minutes regarding the Board of Directors meeting June 10th, 2020.
Move adoption, John.
Thank you, Dr. McNabb. Seconded by?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Coots. Any errors, omissions, additions, etc.? Nope. Okay, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to the Alberni Valley and Banfield Services Committee meeting dated June 17th, 2020.
Move adoption, John.
Thank you, Director McNabb.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Haggard. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, item C, the COVID-19 Community Recovery Team, CRT meeting dated June 17th, 2020.
Move adoption.
Thank you, Director.
Second that.
Bob Beckett.
Seconded by Dr. Osborne. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, so that brings us to petitions, delegations, and presentations. Normally we have a 10-minute limit, so usually I start that timer once we get to the next full minute. And if I hold up 2 fingers or 1 finger, Larry, I'm not trying to stop you. I'm just letting you know how much time you got left. But you may not be able to see me because of the video camera stuff, but I'll just let you know at 1 minute in. Unless it seems like you're pretty close to finishing, then I fudge the numbers. Okay, please go ahead, Mr. Stevenson. You have, oh, and Mr. McRae, who are representing the Island Corridor Foundation. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me here. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to try and get my screen up here.
So it's Ken. So I just, we got some new members on the board. So I'll just give you a brief history of the Island Corridor Foundation. So when Rail America left, they left it in a real mess. And we weren't invited, but we showed up anyway. I was vice chairman of the regional district at the time to the meeting in Cowichan with the First Nation to see what we were going to do with the rail line. CP, provincial and federal governments, they have big ideas what they're going to do with it. The First Nations in Cowichan says, well, you better forget about them ideas because we own it. So then we got together, some of us mayors and people from regional districts, Campbell River, Victoria, and we decided that we can get a committee together with First Nations people, and that's what we did. So our board is made up of half First Nations and half people from regional districts. I managed to get Judith Sayre, who I had worked with quite a bit as mayor, to represent this area, and Judith is now chairman of our board. We also had Jimmy Tatouche from Hoopachesset, so we're well represented from Port Alberni on this board. And our main thing was to preserve the railroad. A lot of people got great ideas for the railroad, but our main idea is to preserve it, and that's what we're going to do. I'm also vice chairman of the Port Authority, so we got some big ideas for the port. We're going to start very quickly moving containers off our port. We got 2 or 3 organizations, DP World, some really big ones, Canadian Stevedore, who would like to use our port for moving containers. So it could be a big thing for us between here and Nanaimo. The organization that runs the trains for us, they've been with us for a long time, through ups and downs, and they're big. They're part of the Washington Group of Companies, one of the biggest movers of containers in the world. So I think we fit pretty good that way. We really have a excellent CEO and Mr. Stevenson too. We're lucky to get him. So that's it for me.
Thank you for that introduction, Ken. First of all, let me say I'm really pleased to be here today and to provide you with an update on the activities of the ICF. It has been a very long while since I last was before you. It was last in January of 2019. And it hasn't been for lack of trying. Your staff has been in touch with me. They've attempted to get me in. We had scheduled a date for March. Of course, COVID-19 happened, and we all know what happened then. So we ended up pushing it down the line. And fortunately, they got back to me again and asked me to come back in now that we're all getting used to the Zoom meetings. So anyway, it's certainly nice to be back here before you. A lot has happened. I'm going to take you through a really quick rundown of kind of where we're at, what's happened, and it'll give you a bit of a timeline as to where we're at. So the last time I was before you, we talked about us coming out of the meeting with the Premier, and in that meeting, he had voiced his frustrations and concerns with us. And frankly, his concerns, his frustrations were valid. I mean, he was concerned about the direction of the ICF. He was also concerned about the costs. And most of that, in my view, came from the never-ending number of studies that were done and the never-ending amount of numbers that were put forward as the idea is how to improve the ICF and how to improve the corridor. So following that, shortly after I was to see you in January, the province announced that they would be undertaking an assessment, and that assessment was to do a complete cost view of the entire corridor to bring it to a certain level of service. And I'm sure most of you have seen what the assessment now that it's out. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But once that assessment got started, that didn't really stop anything for us. We still went out and continued to look for that broad base of support that we think is going to be needed to make this happen. And in February of 2019, the 13 mayors of the CRD got together and wrote a letter of support to restore rail to the island. First time I think they've ever agreed on anything. Shortly thereafter, Victorian City Council passed a resolution supporting rail. The Northern mayors passed letters of support. And then we had the AVICC resolution in April of 2019. So we really established a very broad base of support. And I'm happy to say today that just in the last hour, I was informed that the BC Chambers of Commerce, the provincial BC Chambers of Commerce, not a regional or a city chamber, but the provincial BC Chamber of Commerce has just passed a resolution supporting rail as well. So that support continues to grow. So where are we today? Most of you probably know we were in court in February with the Snotnawas Nation. We are waiting for a determination to come out of that trial. Of course, their assessment was released in May of 2020. And then we have this thing over here called the South Island Transportation Study that you may or may not have heard of, that the ministry keeps referring to, and we'll talk about that. But the bottom line is that there's a bunch of decisions that are going to get made in fairly short order that I think are going to determine where we're going to go in the future. So let's talk a minute about the assessment. This was a necessary step in the process of getting to a shared version in our view. I mean, this is an extremely complex document. I don't know if any of you have had the time to review it. We certainly have gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. I have to say we are in general agreements with the findings of the report. And when I say that, what I mean is that the costs associated with the restoration that's used in the report, in our view, are valid and they're realistic. That doesn't mean that there aren't some areas that are a bit problematic. You know, if you've looked at the report, they have a 50% contingency built in and a 50% admin cost that has the overall impact of doubling the project cost. And I have said very publicly that, you know, I think if you're about to embark on a project and you require 100% to cover, you know, the oops factor, I think you've got the wrong people managing the project. If you look at what they have put forward in the assessment, it came out with two pieces. One was a commuter piece, which was Langford to Victoria only, and it was a high-end commuter that had 24 trains operating in the Langford-Victoria corridor throughout the day. Something that's probably not needed today. The other side of that report was the three phases that they talked about. The first phase is a very low service phase that certainly I don't think anybody's going to support. We're certainly not going to support it. The train speeds are way too low to support, you know, moving people around the island and doing it efficiently. What we did say is that we would certainly support kind of a middle ground and a hybrid at that. That would put the cost somewhere, if you take what they have said, about $500 million. But you can alter that cost by taking some steps to mitigate costs that aren't necessarily required today, which would lower that by 100 million. So you're down now to 400. And if you start talking contingencies and min costs, I think you can certainly build this railroad for $300 million. And that's the entire island. What's interesting here is that the province to this date will not explain or comment regarding the study. Instead, their response has been that we will wait for the South Island Transportation Study and we'll use that as guidance going forward. So what is the South Island Transportation Study? This is a study they came out with right after the assessment. It's pretty telling to us that they won't talk about the assessment until the study is complete. The problem with this study, and of particular, I think, concern or should be of particular concern to you, is that this study is only going to deal with Duncan South. It's not going to deal with the rest of the island, and it does not address the needs of the communities north of Duncan. We've long known that that has been the province's focal point. They've been very clear that they wanted to see something happen in the Langford to Victoria corridor, and we've certainly been in agreement with that, provided that there was conditions put in place to deal with the rest of the island. So we're kind of interested to see what's going to happen here. I mean, it's just another delay. We were originally told this was supposed to be out in March, then it became June. Now we're hearing this summer. We've tried to reach out to the ministry, and to date, there's been no comment from them relative to when it's going to be released. So what's next? You know, certainly COVID-19 has presented some challenges. It's difficult for us to move forward aggressively. We understand that all governments are struggling, but we also see this as an opportunity. I mean, the rehabilitation of this corridor is a shovel-ready project in our mind. And it's a key infrastructure project. And it will have instant and significant economic impact to the province. You know, just as an example, if you look at it, in the assessment, they're calling for the replacement of up to 250,000 rail ties. Well, those rail ties can be manufactured right here on this island. And that's about $60 million worth of work right there. So, you know, you've got foresters involved, you've got truckers involved, you've got a whole bunch of people involved in the manufacturing of those ties. All of the aggregates are available here on the island. The people to do this work are here in British Columbia. The companies are here in British Columbia, and we can put them to work. We put that forward to the Premier on April the 20th. Delegated a response from Minister Trevena. As of this date, a month later, we still have not heard from the minister. What's next? You know, we remain pretty quiet to allow the province the time it needed to do the assessment, and it's now complete. You know, there should be no more confusion. We have a base from which to work from. The assessment is on its way to becoming just another study if we continue to allow the province to delay. You know, it's really down to the point where it's time to get to work. We've asked the province to put together a team to progress with a project plan and funding proposal. We've gotten no response. And, you know, we can't remain quiet for long, and we do need your help. The province needs to hear from you. Further delay shouldn't be acceptable to anyone. With that, I'll open it up to questions. Fire away.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Okay, it doesn't look like there's any. Ken, do you have any anything to add?
No, it's just that, you know, I've been in this for a long time, and when the Liberals were in power, the NDP's comments were, let's get the rail line running. Now they're in power, let them do what they said they were going to do before the election. So you know, it's been a long time. The big thing is we have preserved the corridor, and that's been, you know, we've had a lot of people who want to get rid of it. You can see the comments, but I think the majority of the people on the island, they want going again. You know, our port probably could be one of the best ports in British Columbia, but we definitely need a train coming in and out of it. So.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, do any of the directors have any comments or questions? Go ahead, Diane. Director Bodner, sorry.
Thank you. If this does go through, I'm sorry I missed the beginning of this. If it does go through, how long will it take for it to be up and running?
Well, from the time that the government announces funding, I mean, there's going to have to be some engineering work and design work done, but the actual construction time that it'll take to actually put the rail back in service is not that long. You know, they can, with the machinery that's out there today, you can do probably 2 to 3 miles a day on this thing. So it wouldn't take very long, and we would have to phase that in anyway. So you'd likely start in the Victoria Langford area, and then you would keep working your way north. So it's really not that long. And if you really put emphasis on it, you could go faster than that.
Just another comment. APD is a high producer of railroad ties. You haven't seen many lately, but at one time they could run ties 24 hours a day. So yeah, it would be good for the economy in this area. It would also be good for the fish too that's moving back and forth. We've got lots of support from them. People love us to move it back and forth in containers. So.
Okay, great. Director Cote, please.
Thank you. I think this is great news to be moving forward. I know that a year ago there was a roundtable where there was a lot of communities expressing their interest in moving this forward. So thank you.
I certainly appreciate your comments. And, you know, when I think of the people from Nanaimo over to Port Alberni, and to Ken's point about the port, this railroad has a big role to play in Port Alberni, in my view. And in fact, across the entire region through there. I mean, I think when I look at this as a railroad person, I've made the comment many times about the pot of gold is actually sitting in Port Alberni. You know, we talk a lot about the movement of people, and that's very key. That's extremely important. And the focus today is certainly on the movement of those people, but we cannot lose sight of what is available to us in Port Alberni. And that's the part that I think we really need to make sure the government remembers.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other comments? Okay, I think I only have the one myself is in regards to the interests of the region, it does seem as though that the benefits are equally, you know, moving goods as well as people. I think when we think of the South Island plan, it's really about allaying the difficulties in regards to just commuting in the areas of the capital area. But from at least from my understanding of our perspective, we're really looking at moving goods as well. And I think there's that economic component to really look at, to say nothing of the what Ken McCrae had stated about making ties and that sort of thing.
Well, you have hit on a very key point there, and it's one we've talked a lot about, and that's the need to make sure that when you design this railroad, you design it to meet the regional needs and the unique needs of each region. You know, you talk about Port Alberni, and we talk about the freight, and that's not to say we can't run a passenger train at a Port Alberni, but are we going to run a passenger train every 2 or 3 hours? Probably not. You know, there's been talk about things like, you know, the folks in Parksville running a small type commuter line between Parksville and Nanaimo. I know that's something we may want to consider doing, but again, it's going to have to be done on a regional basis. But until you go out and you fix the roadbed, you put the rail back in place, none of that is possible. So that's kind of the starting point. Let's get the railroad up and running, and then we can build the services that we want around that.
Mm. Okay, thank you for that. I think that demonstrates a lot of the flexibility that's capable with not only, you know, how we operate the railroad, but the fact that the actual infrastructure matters first.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming, and Mr. McCrae as well, and we look forward to further updates.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, could we have someone move to receive the presentation, please?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Shannon.
Second.
Seconded by Director McNabb. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, brings us to item 6. There is no correspondence for action. Would anyone like to pull anything out of correspondence for information? If not, we can just move to receive it. Director Coots?
Yeah, motion to receive the reports.
Okay, and
Second, Penny.
seconded by Director Cote. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item 8, which is requests for decisions and bylaws. So that brings us to 8A, the Bamfield Volunteer Fire Department floating dock and boathouse contract reward.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors award the contract for the replacement of the Bamfield Volunteer Fire Department floating dock and boathouse to Coastal Bridge and Construction Limited for the quoted bid price of $45,000 and $34 plus taxes.
Seconded, Director Roberts.
Thank you, Director Roberts. Do we have any comments?
Just that it's badly needed. The photos in the report adequately depict the condition of it, and I know that the volunteer firefighters are anxious to get on with it, and we appreciate the support.
Okay, great. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item B, which is the Alberni Valley and Bamfield Waste Management Asset Management Plan, version 1. Go ahead.
Hi, so this plan was actually presented to the Alberni Valley and Bamfield Committee last week. It is the first of our 2 landfill plans and slightly different than our other other asset management plans, as the landfill is a little bit of a different type of asset. So there's a lot of things that were identified to go into the improvement plan for moving forward, but a really great start as a first version and lots of tools for staff and the board to use moving forward, and integrating the studies such as our waste composition study that we've had done in the last year, as well as looking at our levels of service moving forward. So super happy to present it to the board for adoption.
Great. Would anyone like to move?
So I would move that the Alberni-Claycourt Regional District Board of Directors adopt the Alberni Valley and Bamfield Waste Management Asset Management Plan version 1.
Second.
Second the motion.
Thank you, Director McNabb. All right, any further comments? Go ahead, Director McNabb.
So looking through this, there are a couple of areas that are really of interest. One of them is the gas management portion of it. Originally, we were forecasted to be in around the 90% of what we were able to kind of store or have in gas emission from the landfill, and that was based on the volume that had been placed in the landfill. So the formula that's currently being used gives us about a 65 or 68%, based on where we have to be working on actual gas management or gas extraction. So that gives us a little breathing room to get our organics program underway, and I'm pleased about that, to see that. The composition portion of it, waste composition portion of it, when you read the graphs, they aren't quite what they sort of seem to be. It's a percentage of the collection from each area, not a percentage of the total from each area. So if you understand what I mean, it's, say for Beaver Creek, if 15% of the waste is organic, that's what's recorded there. It's not that Beaver Creek is 35% of the input of organics into the landfill. So I had a little trouble with that one when I read through it. I thought, holy smokes, how can that be even possible? But overall, I mean, it's a good economic report as far as asset management is concerned, and I know that when we go forward with our organics, the picture is going to look a lot better than it has in the past. And as I say, it gives us a little bit of breathing room, which we actually didn't have previously. So thank you for the work.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any further comments? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Awesome. Okay, that brings us to item C, which is the ACRD Apple and Google developer app. It's developer account agreement. Hi, Rob. Please go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, so this is regarding the recycling app. The board's already given us authorization to move ahead with this project and enter into the agreements. We're actually looking for the delegated authority to allow George Rose to manage the accounts moving forward, and that is the recommendation.
Great, thank you. Would anyone like to move the motion? Thank you, Director Haggard.
Second, Bob Beckett.
Thank you, Director Beckett.
Would you like me to read it out, Mr. Chair, or?
I think that's probably a good idea.
Okay. I'd like to move that the Alberni Clay-Quat Board of Directors authorize George Rose, ACRD Manager of Information Technology, to enter into current and subsequent Apple developer and Google Play developer program agreements on behalf of the ACRD, which gives Recollect permission to create and maintain the ACRD Collects app.
Great. All righty. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. All right, that brings us to item D, which is the Albany Valley Landfill Recycling Depot Product Care Recycling Agreement. And go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so we're looking to expand our stewardship opportunities at the landfill, and product care is one of them. Product care helps collect paints, solvents, and lighting fixtures, etc. As well as we're looking to expand the OnCorp stewardship program at the landfill, but we don't need a new contract with them, as we can add on to the West Coast. And so the recommendation is just to enter into an agreement with Product Care.
Okay, Director McNabb, please go ahead.
So I would move that the Albany Clay-Quat Regional District Board of Directors authorize the board chair and CEO to enter into agreement with Product Care Recycling effective upon signing and ending December 31st, 2021 with the option to renew.
Seconded, Mr. Chair.
All righty. Thank you, Director McNabb. Thank you, Director Coots. Any further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that's the next item is item E, the Albany Valley Electoral Area Transit Feasibility Study.
I can speak to this one too, Mr. Chair. We furthered our discussion on this topic last week at the Alberni Valley and Banfield Services Committee. The committee endorsed moving ahead with the project and expanding the scope of looking at transit options in the Alberni Valley. And so that will be the next step, is for BC Transit to work with ourselves, the city, and possible other stakeholders on refining the scope, which will include engagement and timelines. And so I think based on their timelines, they're hoping to get a terms of reference for the project scope back to us in the early fall.
Okay, thank you for that.
With that, I would move that the ACRD Board of Directors direct staff to work with BC Transit on further developing a new rural transit service option for the Alberni Valley.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Haggard. Does anyone have any comments? Director McNabb.
So one of the big things that we talked about with kind of moving ahead with this is really to look for an option that is realistic and affordable. The option that was placed on the table really pretty much worked out to about $40 net cost for each rider on the system, which really doesn't make any sense. I mean, you know, you could hire a cab to achieve that. So the challenge is to find a type of transportation that is within the scope of reality in today's world, and that is going to be utilized by a higher number than a possibility of 3,000 riders per year. So I mean, it certainly isn't anywhere near a done deal. We've got to come up with something that makes sense, and BC Transit is not necessarily, I don't think, thinking in the same way that we are in this thing, particular at the current moment. But I think by the end of the day, we'll achieve that and look for those options that can really give us something that will improve transportation, make it affordable, and that won't be a major tax burden on all of the rural areas. So it's It's not going to be an easy deal, but it's worth the talk, that's for sure.
Okay, further comment? Okay, I'll start a list here. I have Director Shannon and then Cote.
Thank you, Chair Jack. I just wanted to say that what I got out of that meeting as well was the communication aspect of the study, and that going forward that we'd like to see more improvement there and get more public engagement in the process versus having the public be aware of it after it's been reported on via a meeting rather than when we actually did public consultation. So looking towards avenues where we can improve that in the future. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And I have Director Cote. And did I miss anyone? Director Bodner, thank you. Go ahead, Director Cote.
Thank you. There's further along in our agenda, we're going to be receiving the age-friendly report that's been done, this study that has some information that's come from the community about how they can age in place and what the supports that they're going to need. Transportation is one of them. So I think that by taking a step back, we're going to be able to see how the suggestion from BC Transit was arrived at, and that it is a good idea for the whole valley. And also the BC Transit forum that I attended a week ago talked about re-looking at how BC Transit in the province delivers this service to communities, and how we are by no way being hit up hard the way that other communities are with their transit, bigger communities, with the lack of ridership and the cost of their transit. So one of the suggestions was for BC Transit to go back and take a look at how the service is delivered and how the costing is put out there. Big communities were asking that BC Transit not put this down onto the taxpayers. So there may be new initiatives coming forward from BC Transit on the way that the service is delivered all over the province in an equitable manner, and taking away the cost from the consumers and absorbing that through the province. I've been also at previous BC Transit meetings where different models were presented. I think it's Switzerland or somewhere. There's a city that pays, everybody pays like, I don't know, $100 on their tax. I'm not saying that this is something that we would do, but everybody pays that and they can ride the bus for free as many times, as many days as they'd like. So there's other models out there to take a look at. And I think that that's what BC Transit is doing now as far as costing. So thanks.
Okay, next up we have Director Bodner. Is there anyone else? Seeing none. Okay, please go ahead, Director Bodner.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to echo what Director McNabb and Director Cote were saying. Cost is going to be a real thing. It seems a shame to put so much work into something that's taking so much time and not being able to figure out what it's going to cost for a ride. And I really think that's going to be a big thing that we're going to have to deal with without putting it all on the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thanks. Director Roberts, were you waving at the camera to speak? Yeah, please go ahead.
I just want to say thanks to Mr. Williams for all the work that he's put into this. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to ride the bus with him because I don't think it's going to be in operation by the time he leaves. It looks like it's going to be 2 or 3 years down the road, and that's fair enough. As far as funding this process is concerned, and not spending taxpayers' dollars per se, I understand that some of the other regional districts are looking at the Community Works Fund money to implement their shortfalls with regards to transit. So I would just want to put the bug in everybody's ear that that's probably not the way we want to go. Hopefully that transit can come up with an alternate funding source for this program, and hopefully we can get on with it. And as is mentioned by Director Cote, to help out the seniors and the others in this community. And thanks for that.
Okay, are there any other comments? Okay, seeing none. So we have a motion by Director Coots and seconded by Director Haggard to develop a new service report option. So all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item F, Fire Smart Residential Curbside Pickup and Disposal of Yard Waste in the Alberni Valley and Fire Smart Assessments on Critical Infrastructure in the Alberni Valley. It seems like those are two separate things. Please go ahead.
So as you are aware, we received a large Fire Smart grant from UBCM, and this RFD outlines two of the proposals. One is curbside pickup for residents who do their own Fire Smart work on the property. And then the other one is contracting or hiring a contractor to do Fire Smart assessments on critical infrastructure in the Alberni Valley. So all of the city and regional districts and Tashot and Hupachess, it's critical infrastructure. We would have Fire Smart assessments done on them and look at what things we need to do to make our assets more resilient to wildfire. So the request in the RFD is to delegate the authority to the CAO to enter into these contracts once I've tendered them.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Cote.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if this the critical infrastructure in the Alberni Valley, is that related to a year or so ago, they were trying to get communities to do assessments on their buildings? Is that sort of the same program?
It likely is, yeah. So we're going to look at all of our infrastructure. So our fire halls, water infrastructure, anything that the city or the regional district or the First Nations own.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments?
I have another one.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So the curbside pickup for Fire Smart residential properties, that is for the city of Port Alberni only, isn't it?
No, it's for the Alberni Valley, and it's on an as-needed basis. We are trying to target people that don't have vehicles that can't take their yard waste to the landfill or another location in town.
So how will people know about this? Or
so we'll advertise the program once it's ready, and people will phone into the regional district, and we'll coordinate that with a contractor for pickup.
So is there a limit on this?
A limit of size or a number of times, or we will have a limit on size that can be picked up at somebody's property, yes.
Thanks. There's some pretty large properties.
Thank you. Director Roberts?
So, yeah, I understand using the terminology Fire Smart, but I know that a lot of other municipalities are doing it on a regular basis annually, and giving a date for residents in the valley that that they could put their yard waste out for pickup and for chipping, and that chip material is utilized for composting and whatever. So I think the thing that I've learned is giving a date in either the fall or the spring for this to occur would seem to me to be a logical part of the logical steps in the process. Thank you.
Yeah, and that was considered, Director Roberts. We've put a few things into this Fire Smart grant, a few opportunities. This is the first time we've had this large of a grant, and so we've put in quite a few opportunities. We want to see what's successful and then build upon that.
Thanks. I have Director McNabb next. Did I miss anyone? Okay, go ahead.
So I would move that the Alberni Claycotte Regional District Board of Directors delegate the Chief Administrative Officer authority to enter into contracts for Fire Smart residential curbside pickup with a contractor that submits a suitable proposal. Can these two go together, or?
I think they have to be separate. I think that's why they start. Yeah. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. Okay, any further comments? Go ahead.
So I'm thinking about the last comment with regards to this. I think the logistics of by appointment when you're dealing with a contractor makes a lot more sense. You know, that they can go into a certain area and pick this product up on an appointment basis, and rather than trying to do the whole valley on one weekend. So it's I think it's really a good idea on an interface fire basis, and it is something that our fire department in Beaver Creek's been sort of thinking about for quite a while about how we protect ourselves from interface fire. So this is a good start. Thank you.
Thanks. I have Director Bodnar next.
Thank you. Yes, I'm really glad to see this is going to go ahead as well. And what I'd like to know that once this grant is used up, then how is this, and it happens to be successful, how is it going to be funded after that?
If there's future grant opportunities, we'll pursue those. If not, we could look at paying for the service.
Okay. Are there any further comments? Okay, so we have the first motion moved by Director McNabb and seconded by Director Shannon. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All right, motion carried. Go ahead.
I would move that the Alberni Claycotte Regional District Board delegate the Chief Administrative Officer authority to enter into contracts for Fire Smart assessment on critical infrastructure.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Do we have a seconder? Director Cote, thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. All right. Thank you. Okay, I think that brings us to the Alberni Claycotte Regional District COVID-19 Safety Plan. Douglas, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The document is prepared under the leadership of Heather and Wendy, and I'm grateful to them for that leadership on this document. And but as well, it's gone through a substantive staff review as well. So we had very good participation from all staff. The document is to, as stated, to obviously protect members of the public and the directors and staff under this pandemic situation, while very importantly allowing the services that the board have mandated to proceed. And of course, it meets the WorkSafe requirements, which is something that we're bound to do. It also will set the parameters for our ability to start having appointment-based members of the public come to the office for different types of inquiries and applications, et cetera, where those can be done perhaps better in person. We've been, I think, reasonably successful in meeting those needs remotely, but there are sometimes the in-person conversations that are difficult to replace through technology, et cetera. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd leave it subject to any questions that you may have for staff. Thank you.
Any comments or questions? Director Haggard?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On your staff questionnaire that they have to answer every day, There was one question on there that kind of concerned me. Like, for example, I get numerous headaches because of a car accident I was in, which resulted in a neck injury. So in those kinds of circumstances, would that just be put in on a personnel file that they could still answer yes, but there is a reason that they're answering yes? Could you comment on that, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. The answers are absolutely meant to be contextual, and we've had a number of employees, for example, I'm not going to name names here. One gentleman who was very, very tired the night before and reportedly snored like crazy and woke up with quite a sore throat and a headache from the snoring, stayed home, and after further conversation with his wife, he was okay to come to work on the following day, saying, "Oh no, I know exactly what that was." Subsequently, so yes, there are a number of contexts in which employees will find isolated circumstances. We certainly had an awful lot of that during pollen season as well.
Makes me wonder if your benefits cover CPAP devices. Okay. Any further comments? Okay, I'm quite oh, go ahead, Director Cote.
Thank you. As we proceed, I'm just would like reports if there's any incidents. Do we have an incident report for interactions, I guess, with the community and our staff members, and incident reports, that type of thing happening right now? Or
Mr. Chair, I'd certainly invite other staff members to assist in answering that question. To date, because the office has not been open to the public, that has certainly limited the opportunities for difficult interactions that is what I'm hearing as being meant by an incident. With respect to bylaw enforcement, we've really sought to observe and take those observations and fold those into further recommendations for policies for the board, et cetera. For example, like the playground policy that's there. So to date, I'm not aware of any. Some people are, raise questions about while on the telephone with our reception person about different aspects of the service delivery. And to my knowledge, most people are coming away reasonably satisfied with the answers. We're certainly trying to be vigorous in figuring out a way to get the 3rd Avenue depot back open, and we're getting lots and lots of questions on that, and that's a further report a little bit later in the agenda. But I'm pleased to say that we haven't had anything that has been controversial or challenging with respect to interactions with the public. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add, because a few of the services have required staff to be on site. For example, building inspection, and I just want to note that the experience with for the building inspectors has been positive, in that we've implemented some additional procedures for on-site inspections, and the builders and contractors have followed those procedures, and they've gone smoothly, and we haven't had any incidents as a result of that, and business is carrying on.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any comments? Let's see. Okay. Okay, Director Cote, and then Heather.
Thank you. And looking at the report on page 174, the occupancy, I know that we have 20 plus employees. So I'm just wondering, upstairs total is supposed to be 10, maybe 1 or 2 downstairs. There's a lot of staff then that are continue to work from home. And I'm just wondering if this continues for a year or so, is this going to be a positive work schedule that we like? I'd like to know how you're going to schedule so that people can still get into the office and still meet this expected occupancy limit in our, because we have such a small building and you keep chopping up into smaller and smaller little offices. So do we need a new building?
Well, this conversation, Mr. Chair, came up also during the asset management plan with respect to general government and what might the future look like. Should we outgrow this building, et cetera. And the board was specific in saying, let's not be very prescriptive in the asset management plan, because we might look at other things other than just build a new building, et cetera. And so there's no question that that we're getting reasonably tight in this building for sure. And while the number 10 is actually a relatively small number compared to how many people normally work in the building, it's when you get into moving through the hallways and moving to washrooms and photocopier rooms and printers and just people going about their business that becomes challenging when we work at that number, sort of 9 or 10 people. But we're learning an awful lot about working in remote spaces, et cetera, as is the rest of the country, if not the world. And that provides us some very interesting insights into what the future might look like should the board decide to add services that result in adding staff. It provides us some very interesting hands-on data about, does the future of this office necessarily mean growing the building should the staff grow? So it's we're doing a number of things in terms of putting people in, instead of the sort of work who would normally work in the common areas, redeploy them in a vacant office, et cetera. And we're keeping, we're creating a weekly list that is done the preceding Thursday to see who's going to be out and who's going to be in every single day in the following week, et cetera. And then as operational needs require, we adjust that on a daily basis. And so that's the sort of things we're learning as we're working through this. I think that's a pretty common theme, again, throughout the province and the country. So I hope that answered the question.
Okay, Director Cote.
Thank you. So I'm wondering, because we do own other property, like the recycle building, I'm wondering if we could temporarily set up offices in there. It's a very big space and I've been inside. It's not totally full in the inside, but I'm not sure what the plans are for the recycle, that building, and just thought, it might be an option for a temporary office setup so that we could move a department there, or just so that we had the ability to have office space. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, just my comments on that would be our first objective for that building is really to get some version of its previous use, that is for recycling materials, back as an available service to the public. And so we're working with the contractor on that primary objective. We would certainly throw that into the mix as well, though, however, because I think that these are unconventional times. So unconventional solutions are always going to be welcome and worth consideration. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. So we do have a motion in front of us, although I don't think it's been moved or seconded yet. Is that correct? I think so. Dr. Haggard, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors adopt the ACRD COVID-19 Safety Plan as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Director Cote. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. All right, that brings us to the playground policy. Please go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. So the policy was drafted based on some legal advice that we had received. It's just a COVID-19 playground policy. It outlines that our playgrounds have reopened, and what we're doing in the interim is signing the playgrounds, outlining that people are to supervise their children, use hand sanitizer, wash your hands before and after use, keeping distance between adults, staying home if you're sick, And then really outlining that we aren't sanitizing or disinfecting the playgrounds. So the policy is there for your consideration.
I quite enjoy the do remember to have fun part of the signage. It's quite good. Dr. Shannon.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the ACRD Board of Directors adopt the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District COVID-19 Playground Policy.
Second, Bob Beckett.
Thank you, Director Beckett. Great. Moved and seconded. Do we have any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. I just read an article that kind of supports the idea that as long as it's outside and people don't stick very close, it should be okay. Surfaces don't seem to be that much of a issue, especially since a lot of the plastics are antibacterial now that are used in playgrounds. Okay, that brings us to item I, which is proposed building inspection agreement with the Ho-Chuklassit tribe.
That's mine.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the Chucklissit approached the ACRD and had asked if we would be able to enter into a building inspection agreement, and we've the draft agreement for the board to consider, and this would be similar to what we have with the Hawaiian First Nation as well as the City of Port Alberni, Toquan, Tofino, Ukiulit. So don't anticipate, this stage, not anticipating a large number of inspections, but there is some work being done that they would like us to work with them on. And as with the others, we would just be inspecting for BC building code issues, provincial and their legislation. Their staff would be responsible for making sure that the buildings comply with those.
Great. Go ahead, Director Coots.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I move that the Board of Directors enter into a 2-year agreement with the Ho-Chuklassit tribe to provide building inspection services and to direct the CAO and chairperson to sign the attached inspection services agreement. Thank you.
Dr. McNabb?
Seconded.
Yep. Okay. And did anyone have a comment? Dr. Cote, please go ahead.
Thank you. A couple questions. So these properties that building inspection it will be required, is that requiring travel by boat to get there? Does the ACRD have the capacity right at this moment with the COVID-19? I know in the building inspection report that we had at the EA directors, Mr. Erg had mentioned that we were very busy this year. So I'm just wondering, I'm not against this by any means, but I just wanted to know if we have the capacity at this moment, how this is going to affect building inspection, because I've heard 5 to 10 weeks to get a building permit. So that's quite a wait. So like, where would they fit?
Yeah, so from what I understand right now, there's 4 buildings that are being looked at, and the Chucklissit would be providing basically the boat ride down, the transportation down. So yes, it would be by boat for the ones that we know of right now, and it is for a small number of buildings.
Okay, I had Director Roberts, and then we can go back to Director Cote.
Yeah, I think Mr. Erg basically covered everything. I know that all costs associated with it, labor and so on, are covered by the agreement. So I'm good with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Director Cote?
Thank you. So I'm just wondering how this fits in with the COVID. We discussed that the Marine Patrol couldn't go in the boat because of distancing. So will that be affecting boat rides now, or is this for the future so that to be allowed?
From what I understand, it's a larger boat, and sort of we'll be able to meet the safety requirements, the plan reviews and checks. Those types of things are done in the office, so we'll just be going down for those inspections, and our policy applies in the same way it would apply for the other inspections. And then just a comment around building permit process time. We're about 4 to 5 weeks right now is what I understand. I mean, there's certainly, we from time to time get building permit applications where they're not complete. And so we may have them for a period of time. But those really, the clock doesn't start ticking until we have a complete building permit application. And there's often permits where we're waiting for things to come in. So that affects things as well. So if that helps answer your other comment or question.
Great, thank you. Any
Thanks.
further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to item J, the local government meeting and bylaws process item. So this is the additional item. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'll speak to that one, Mr. Chair. So late at the end of last week, we received a new minister order from the Public Safety and Solicitor General. This one replaces the previous one that was in effect for holding meetings electronically during COVID, and also being the ability to give 3 readings and adoptions to certain bylaws. So the previous order has been replaced with this new one, and the new order is working towards getting local governments back to a more normal as we move through the provincial restart program. So the new order requires local governments to make best efforts to allow in-person attendance of the public at open meetings, and this includes board and committee meetings. So I've provided a guide that the ministry has provided that discusses what best efforts include. So that will include staff investigating larger venues that we could have in-person meetings, board and committee. So if local governments cannot find facilities or accommodate the best efforts, the board has to pass a resolution as to the reason why they have to continue doing electronic meetings. And they also have to pass a resolution showing that they're ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability in their meetings, doing, for example, what we're doing today. So because we got this late last week, staff are recommending that the board pass a resolution instructing staff to continue holding electronic meetings until the next board meeting on July 22nd. And that'll give us more time to investigate options for larger facilities. We'll need to look at what electronic capabilities we would need. So we'll come back. So from now until July 23rd, all our meetings, committee and board, would be held via Zoom. And so the recommendation is there for your consideration, and I can answer any questions you might have.
And this motion looks like it's one full motion just with 2 paragraphs, correct?
Yes, we could do that one. We could do it that way.
Yeah, because it's that and further that.
Yeah, yes, correct.
Okay, welcome back, Director Minions. Okay, does anyone have any comments or questions or would like to move the motion? Director Minions.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that we are at the city looking to set up using the Capitol Theatre because they've got all of the ability that we need for live streaming and sound and all of that. And we think it's a facility that's big enough to facilitate public being able to come in person. So I know it's not, ready to go set up, but it might be worth us kind of using the same option. And then something else we considered was trying to work with the high school as well, because they've got a great facility. So I'm happy to see us trying to move back to this, but I know it will look different. So thanks to staff for the work happening on this.
Thank you.
Great. Would anyone like to move the motion? Thank you, Director Shannon. I'm going to ask you to read it out, though.
Okay. Okay, I'll move that in accordance with Ministerial Order M192 and to protect the health and safety of staff, elected officials, and the public, Alberni Clayoquot Regional District, ACRD, board and committee meetings continue to be held without members of the public in attendance until July 23rd, 2020, in order for staff to investigate and report back to the ACRD Board of Directors on possible options for safely holding in-person board and/or committee meetings while adhering to public health officer recommendations and requirements related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And further that, in the interest of openness, accountability, and transparency, ACRD board and committee meetings continue to be conducted via Zoom video conferencing and live streamed on the ACRD website.
Seconded.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Roberts. I saw that you had your hand up, Dr. Cote. Did you have another comment or question? No? Okay. Okay. Any further comments? All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay. I like the idea of the theater or the school. The auditorium there's nice. So, okay, that brings us to planning matters. We're about an hour and 15 minutes in. Do folks need bio breaks at all? Just want to check first. All right, so let's just not disappear on the EA directors so that we don't lose quorum. But you know, filtering away one-on-one's fine. All right, 9.1A is AB 20001, City of Port Alberni. Go ahead.
I would just note that this is both the items on the agenda are for all the electoral area directors. There's no rural planning, so this applies to everyone.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just normally we have some of the other items to deal with first, and then comes the regional planning component. But that's what we have today. So I do know there is a late agenda item that Ms. Thompson had mentioned, and if the board wanted to consider that first before I give an explanation of this example.
Yes, let me call it up. It went out as an email for everyone's benefit. So it was sent at 10:33 by Wendy Thompson in your email inbox. If you're looking for it, because I am. There we go.
We will also put it on our website right now as well.
Okay.
Director Jack.
Please go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I actually didn't realize that the city had a vote on this. And I'm wondering if, given that we are the owners of McLean Mill, I'm feeling like it probably would be appropriate for us to recuse ourselves. I don't know if staff has an opinion on that, but just kind of thinking of it very basically, the city owns McLean Mill and we're making the application. So, yeah. If anyone has an opinion otherwise, let me know.
Yeah, so I think from a perception perspective, you might have a point, and it might be beneficial, Janice, if we just put them in the waiting room and then have them come back instead of disconnect. I'm not certain that there is a conflict. Douglas, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, the ministry has contemplated matters in which members of the board of directors might have business from their sort of home location, in very much in the way that Director Coots was voting on the contract between us and Uchucklesett for building inspection. There's a regulation that deems this to not be a conflict of interest, because I think that Director Menzies is quite right. In the normal order of things, in the absence of such a regulation, then we'd have somebody who is on both sides of the equation. In this particular case, because it happens quite frequently that member municipalities or Treaty First Nations do business with the board, those types of things are deemed to be not a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. That does clarify it very well. Okay, I just accidentally closed it. There we go. Okay, sorry, Mike, please go ahead. Oh, Director Haggard, sorry.
Is it appropriate now for me to ask a question about the process regarding Mr. Adams' request, or should I wait?
I think maybe a quick overview from Mike, and then we'll go right to you right after.
Thank you.
So if you want, and please, Wendy, jump in if if you need. So this is procedurally, this is a late item. So before we discuss it, I guess the board needs to decide if they're going to receive this late item, and then we can discuss the content.
So Mike, they did at the beginning of the meeting. It was authorized as a late item, so it isn't now included, and we're just getting it up on the website as well. Okay. And directors have a copy, and so.
Okay, so I can speak to the
yes.
Email from Mr. Adams.
Yes.
So Mr. Adams is a member of the Agricultural Advisory Committee. He did not participate in the Agricultural Advisory Committee, and he has some comments and input that he would like to provide as a private property or a property owner, as a private citizen. He's requesting that the board defer the making a decision on this referral application from the Agricultural Land Commission, and then so that he has an opportunity to provide some input, whether that will be by email or a presentation to the board. I'm not sure at this point in time. So that's the request from Mr. Adams. I did speak to Tim Bly, the CAO of the City of Port Burnie, and Mr. Bly did say to me that it doesn't impact the city's operations if this application were deferred to the next board meeting, which would be July 22nd. So I think I'll stop at that point and answer any questions any of the directors may have.
Okay, so we'll go back to Director Haggard and then right to Director McNabb.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if staff could answer a question. Is it normal for the public to comment on decisions from the APC committee at a public meeting, or what is the process for this? I'm not familiar with it.
Sure. So maybe I'll back up a little bit and just explain the process for an Agricultural Land Commission referral like we have. So in this case, the board is not, there's a role for local governments, or role for regional districts, when we get referrals for Agricultural Land Commission applications. So in this instance, it's an application from the City of Port Burnie for some non-farm uses on the McLean property, which is all within the Agricultural Land Reserve. There is no public input process. It's not like a rezoning application or a variance where the public's notified and there's an opportunity for input. This is a referral from the Land Commission to the ACRD. We have had some other instances where the public's had concerns or wanted to provide comment to the board, and the public in those instances has provided their comments just through the normal either a letter to the board or a presentation to the board as a delegation. So that's, in this instance, the staff report was written, and then the Agricultural Advisory Committee. So it was public when it went onto the board agenda, and then also public when it went to the Agricultural Advisory Committee around the same time. I think it was sent out last Thursday. And so Mr. Adams in his email is saying that there wasn't enough time or wasn't an opportunity for him to make a presentation to the board. So it is really the board's decision if they wish to. There's certainly not a legal requirement to have public input on these types of applications. But we did, as staff, we committed to bring this to the board for their to make a decision on it.
Thank you. Director McNabb and then Director Cote.
So, I mean, it's kind of the inference is that this was an overnight kind of decision and there was no time to react, which is incorrect. I mean, this submission has been in the wind for almost a year. So, and I've talked to Mr. Adams about it previously. He certainly is aware of the process, and he's aware that it's going to the Agricultural Land Commission for decision. So, I mean, delaying it so he can make some kind of presentation to the board, to me, is just delaying it. I mean, I think that this submission is valid. The one that the City of Port Alberni has put forward. We have forwarded many, and I'm talking probably 20 applications to the Agricultural Land Commission in the last 7 years that I've been around, where we haven't waited so that neighbors can make their presentation to us about forwarding it to the Agricultural Land Commission. The Agricultural Land Commission is totally in control of this decision, and I would strongly suggest that Mr. Adams makes his presentation to the Agricultural Land Commission, who will be able to make their decision based on the evidence put in front of them, including his evidence. So I would certainly not be in favor delaying it for this purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McNabb. Well said. Director Cote.
Thank you. I'd like to say that I was not aware of this application coming forward. And I think that the board as a whole, having this recommendation come yesterday to today's board meeting is a very fast turnaround. I would like to comply with the request to delay this until Mr. Adams can come forward and speak to the board and give his whatever he has to say to us. I'm not sure what it is because he hasn't said anything to me about this application. So just like to point that out. And as the member representing the board on the Agricultural Advisory Committee, I'd just like to say that the vote was not unanimous, and it's not that they were so much against the business that's taking place there. It's that some members believe that this property should be taken out of the ALR and not just have a relaxation of the rules. So I would like to see this delayed myself and hear more from the community because it hasn't been talked about. And this is not a normal agricultural advisory going to the Land Commission application. It's not really a subdivision. It's not normal. This is a business. So it is different. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I have Directors Bodner and then Coots.
Thank you. It seems kind of be mixed up here. I'm trying to make sense of this. Director McNabb, you were saying that that this gentleman had lots of time to share his concerns before yesterday. Is that correct?
As I said, this issue with regards to effective zoning on this property has been around since before the election, and I talked to Mr. Adams about it around that time. So you know, I really think that he has been totally aware of the proceedings as they went along and has had ample time to make a case if he wanted to present it to us. But we're not the decision maker. We're only forwarding this to the Agricultural Land Commission. They're the decision maker. So.
Okay, thank you. I had received 2 phone calls from him this morning, and it seemed to be regarding concerns about McLean's Mill. So I'm just wanted to make sure that I understand what this is, what information it is that he wants to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Coots.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to understand, as Director McNabb has stated, we forward it to the Agricultural Land Commission and they make the decision. We're not the decision-making body, so I don't know why we would be receiving the information or a presentation from the individual or any individual. I'm just trying to, I don't know why we're beleaguering this and not just passing it on.
Thank you for that. It does kind of confuse things at that point. Douglas, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for information as well, Mr. Adams forwarded for the purposes of sharing with one of the directors the fact that he had made a complaint to the Agricultural Land Commission back in February about this. So I bring that up now just to confirm that he has known about this for some time. Not to suggest that the board should or shouldn't hear from him next meeting, but just to confirm that he's aware of what this application is about. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Director Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can I just confirm with staff, will Mr. Adams have an opportunity to present his concerns to the Agricultural Land Commission when they actually receive the application and review it? Is that when he would have an opportunity to present his concerns?
So, and I think I want to answer this sort of correctly. This isn't the type of application where there is a public input process. Certainly, you know, as part of government, whether it's local government or the provincial agricultural land commission, individuals can write in and voice their opinions, concerns, you know, thoughts, however that is, to either the land commission or to the board through the normal course of business. But there isn't, you know, certainly on our part, there's no legal requirement to hold a formal public hearing or to notify property owners of this referral. So, you know, so I mean, Mr. Adams' request sort of is very much, you know, he's requesting that the board defer it, so he has that opportunity to provide some additional input to the board prior to them making a decision on this application. And it is, you know, as Mr. Holmes had mentioned, up to the board on whether they choose to do that or not. You know, it's, I mean, within the scope of legally, you're able to defer this application if you wish, or make a decision, and then it would go to the land commission. And I would note that on these types of decisions, if the board supports the application, it goes to the land commission. If the board were to deny this type of application, it does not go to the land commission. So the board does have some decision-making authority with respect to a non-farm use application.
So Mr. Adams would have the opportunity to express his concerns at that point.
I mean, he could certainly write an email or contact the land commission and provide his comments, and the land commission does what they do, whatever they do with it.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Director Minions and then Director Shannon.
Thank you. I just want to say that although I understand Mr. Adams has a number of concerns with McLean Mill and the operations that are happening there, he has expressed many to the city, and maybe not always to his satisfaction, but we have investigated every single concern. We've hired professionals when needed. We have brought in, you know, Paul Hasselback to provide us expertise. We have taken, I would say, you know, we've spent excessive amounts of time making sure that the concerns he's brought forward have been dealt with fairly. And this is another one of those concerns. And my preference would be that we continue to move forward with this. There has been a lot of input given over time. And we are actually following this process because Mr. Adams brought forward this concern. And now we are trying to go through the proper process to make sure that we have that we are allowed to be doing what we are doing with the Agricultural Land Commission. And this is just a part of us making sure we are following proper process. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks. Director Shannon.
Thank you. I just want to start with the request from Mr. Adams. I've had many phone calls and emails back and forth this past week, and I believe it's coming through because he did not attend the Agriculture Advisory Committee yesterday because of a conflict of interest. So he's trying to, in my opinion, follow protocol, and because the agenda was just out last week, and for communications, whether he was going to be attending the meeting or not, were fairly last minute, and then he did not attend the meeting. So this is why he's looking for this opportunity now. As Director Cote had mentioned earlier too, that even the chair of the AAC meeting yesterday, I'll just point out that I attended the meeting, not as a voting person, but just as director because this application is in the Beaufort. that there was concern too from some community members that that it was fairly quick that their decision that was, or their recommendation that was voted on yesterday was a turnaround for today. So I don't know if we want to, if you need a motion or not for Mr. Adams' request before we go into the actual motion. Chair Jack?
So I think the request is kind of the opposite of what the recommendation is in the report. So it's, should we do one or the other at that point? Unless we want to treat the ALC comment as separate from this entire process, which is an option. So it's, I think I'm just going to leave it up to the board to decide what direction we go in. Now that we've had a discussion about what the context is, then I think we're in a position to have a motion one way or the other. Dr. Roberts, you had a comment?
Just a question. Would Mr. Adams have an opportunity to address this through the Agricultural Land Commission? I mean, for us, it's supporting the City of Port Alberni's application. And then it goes to the ALC. Will he not have an opportunity at that point to discuss it with the ALC?
I think
so. If I may, so yeah. He certainly has the opportunity, just like to send either an email, letter, correspondence. It's up to the Land Commission whether they would allow a presentation or receive the information. So this type of application, as I mentioned before, it doesn't include a public input opportunity. The property was rezoned in 1992, or sorry, in the early 90s. I don't have the exact date. And the uses that are happening, all of the uses on McLeansville that are happening are permitted under the ACRD zoning, and that's zoning is the opportunity for public input through public hearing and things like that. So the zoning to do everything that is going on or that's in the application, the city's application, is already permitted with the zoning that's in place. It's just some of the uses don't conform to the ALC uses or the decision that was made in 1993 regarding McLeansville and the operation of the National Historic Site. So if that's helpful, and if the board would like, I can run through a quick summary of the application, and I'm happy to do that, or answer any questions, or the board can choose to proceed however they wish.
Dr. McNabb. Oh, you're muted, Dr. McNabb. Sorry.
I muted myself instead of unmuting myself. I would move that the board of directors support the City of Port Alberni's application for the non-farm use of McLeansville National Historic Site and forward the application to the Agricultural Land Commission, noting that the uses comply with the Beaufort Official Community Plan and the ACRD zoning bylaw.
Second, Bob Beckett.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Beckett. Do we have further comments? Dr. Cote, and then Dr. Shannon, and then Dr. Roberts.
Thank you. This eliminates any opportunity for the public to comment on this, because there was actually a request. I think that we should do our due diligence and listen to the community that elected us, and allow them an opportunity to have say on planning and manners and recommendations. The city has already said that there is not a problem with delaying it by one meeting. So disappointed that we're eliminating the opportunity for community comments. And I think that we've learned our lesson in the past when we do things quickly and don't include the community to allow to have their say. We're in extraordinary measures right now with COVID, having to do this via Zoom. It eliminates people from being in the audience. because we had this meeting today, there could have been the possibility that the Agriculture Advisory Committee had made a recommendation to deny this. They have issues with it being in the agricultural land, and wish that really the application had been to withdraw it from the Agricultural Land Commission. So I will be voting against this because of that. It's not because I'm against the application, but it's because we're eliminating that public opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Shannon and then Roberts.
Thank you, Chair Jack. I just wanted to touch base a little bit more on some comments that were made in the Agriculture Advisory meeting yesterday in regards to this application. As Director Cote had mentioned, it wasn't a unanimous vote for the people that were there attending it. And actually one of the members just abstained from voting simply because they weren't not in support of the application going forward. They just felt it was the wrong approach and that the city should be working on an application to remove the property from the ALR because the CAO was in attendance of the meeting yesterday, and there's never going to be any intent to do any agriculture on that property. It's strictly going to be to preserve and present heritage as per their federal grant agreement for that property. So that was a little bit of a hesitation point. I don't know if there's an opportunity to maybe make an amendment where we could, or a recommendation where if should this go forward, that perhaps the AAC can further explore with the city for a more long-term approach of removing it from the ALR property or from ALR designation. And then I had a second comment of, there was a question if the city was planning on, because it's in the ALR, of like a kind of nod to agriculture, any plans to try and do some agriculture on the property. And just because of soil quality and contaminations on there, that basically, no, there's no point to that. Again, kind of leaning towards why apply for non-farm use if it's never going to happen, why not just go this other route? And then it was also mentioned that there's 2 known spots of contamination that still need to be remediated. So perhaps, I believe it's underground oil tanks. I don't know the specifics. Shari or Director Haggard might be able to speak more to that, but because there's no agriculture on that property, but there is surrounding agriculture, if there's a way that we can say we would support it, but we would like that to be a priority to be remediated for other areas. I would, if that's possible, I'd like to see something like that. Thank you.
I certainly think that can be a motion or a discussion after this, regardless of what the decision is. I see that as a separate thing completely. The decision we're making, it seems as though it has to do with using the processes that are in place and who's in charge there. The abstention makes me think that it's kind of the same thing being contemplated there as well. So we can look at that, and I think that's something we can talk about after we get through this process. So Director Roberts and then Director Minions.
Yeah, thanks for that. Most of my questions have been asked and answered. I just have one question. Who is the authority having jurisdiction over this property? As a national historic site, maybe you can answer that.
Go ahead.
You want me to answer that? So the city of Port Alberni owns the property, so they're the property owner. The federal government has designated a national historic site, and there's a funding agreement when it was designated. The ACRD is still responsible for the land use, the zoning over the property, and the Agricultural Land Commission administers the provincial agricultural land reserve regulations and act. Mm-hmm. So somewhat complicated. So in this, and I think the important thing in Director Roberts' question is that the agricultural land reserve regulations trumps the ACRD zoning bylaw. So the opinion of the Land Commission and the province is that the city has to still comply with the Agricultural Land Commission regulations, as well as the resolution from the early 90s that allowed the National Historic Site. So that's approved. It's some of the other associated uses that's part of this non-farm use application. And in the staff report, we just lumped it all together and supported the city's request. Some of what's happening out there is permitted already. So sorry, that was a long, convoluted answer, but there's several authorities there.
Yeah, that's 4 authorities, and to say nothing of Ho-Chuck-Lisset Ha-Hopefully as well. So I think the next person we have is Dr. Minions.
Thank you. It's complicated.
Yeah.
So a couple of comments. Firstly, I just want to really caution the board of request that we stay within the scope of what our realm of responsibility is for this decision. And I think that it makes me uncomfortable starting to speculate on contamination, remediation. I believe that is very much outside the scope of this conversation, and also without the board having any of the background information. Comments around those things can sway people without having proper information. So I think it's just important to stay within the scope of the type of decision that we're supposed to be making today. And then I just wanted to comment on the conversation around, should we be applying to remove it from the agricultural land reserve altogether? And I certainly appreciate that comment, because we all know that the intent of that land is not farming. We actually did briefly explore, when we were going through this process and determining our path, if we should just try to remove it from the agricultural land reserve. And we were told that we were told by ALC staff that this is a legitimate path forward to allow the uses that we are intending to do out there that are not currently permitted. And it's important to note that most of what we are doing out there is already permitted. But so we are following a path that the Agricultural Land Commission Reserve staff suggested to us. So this is not something that we came up with ourselves. This is the suggestion from that staff group, and I think that's really important to notice here. And so, yes, we could absolutely apply to just remove it from the ALC, but that's a very different conversation. And we weren't told. We were told by staff that this is a legitimate path forward. So I don't think it's wrong for us to be just trying to get the permitted use rather than removing it altogether. And to be very honest, we don't know what the future use could be. In my opinion, I personally like the idea of it being in the agricultural land reserve, because it's easy for some people to say there's never going to be farming out there, but there absolutely could be farming out there, and we don't know what the future holds. What the site has already transitioned and changed so much over the years, and it certainly could drastically change still. And with some of the concepts and suggestions we've had out there, I could certainly see some kind of future farm use, and it wouldn't be intensive farming, but I could see that as being another use. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, the motion is the one that has been recommended. It's been moved by Director McNabb and seconded by Director Beckett. Any further comment? Dr. Shannon, quickly.
Yeah, sorry, quickly. I have the same feelings as Director Cote on this one with if it's not a hindrance to the city, to defer this to allow for the public input. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. All right, going to a vote now. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, Director Osborne, I'm wondering if you could take over chairing while I quickly go use the facilities. Thank you, and welcome, Amy. Sorry, I'm stepping out on you.
That's okay. Great. Thanks very much. Amy, over to you for a presentation about the Alberni Valley Age-Friendly Plan.
All right. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me. I just have to check. Can you guys all see the presentation there, my intro slide?
You can. Yeah, looks great.
Perfect. Okay. This will be my first time presenting with on Zoom with 2 screens, 2 mice, 2 keyboards, so bear with me. I am excited today to finally present the Alberni Valley Age-Friendly Plan. And as you can imagine, we packed a ton of information into this plan, so I'm going to try and go through this as quick as possible and just really provide some key highlights for what's included in the plan. And hopefully the conversation will continue over the next few months. Some background, as you all know, in 2019, the ACRD received UBCM grant funding to complete Alberni Valley Age-Friendly Plan. And that plan was to focus on the 4 Alberni Valley electoral areas, and really to inform the development of local policies and initiative around the words there in teal. So accessibility, transportation, housing, healthcare, food security, lifelong learning, and recreation. And so the plan was developed over 6 months, actually 6, 7, 8 months, from October 2019 to May 2020. And it was developed by a project team with some ACRD staff, as well as some support from a consultant. And then really the overall guidance was provided from the Age-Friendly Working Group. And the plan was developed based on a set of requirements from UBCM based on the grant funding. And really, we applied for this funding so we could hopefully apply for the second set or stream 2 age-friendly funding through UBCM. So I'll talk more about that later on. And really the main goal is that the ACRD becomes recognized as an age-friendly community. I added this slide about the age-friendly working group early on because I just wanted to stress how important this group was. And so listed here are the different organizations that were involved in this working group, organizations and or residents of the ACRD. And really this group played such a key role. They shared their time, knowledge, ideas, resources, and really had very unique perspectives. And a special thanks, of course, to the working group chair, Director Cote. And really the project team relied very heavily upon this group. Like I said before, they had a wide variety of knowledge and they provided a lot of resources to enable the plan development. And even when the project activities shifted to virtual in mid-March, they were still available to provide guidance and input into the plan development. We had to do a survey and really switch gears. And so it's something that I know that we're all becoming experts on this virtual engagement. So kudos to the working group for working with us and providing such great input. The project background, as we all know, the ACRD is growing in many different ways, aging and definitely changing. It's also, very rural and diverse, and this results in very unique social and environmental challenges, of course, which are somewhat different than those that urban areas face. And so with this aging population here, as you can see, almost 22% of ACRD residents are 65 plus. And then as we drill down to the 4 Alberni Valley electoral areas, 45% of residents are 55 plus, and you could see the breakdown for the electoral areas with Sprout Lake having the highest percentage of residents over 55 plus. And of course, with this aging population, ACRD recognizes there's a need to plan to support this aging in place and to be an age-friendly community through the topics previously mentioned. Of course, I'll cover those more in a little bit. So the plan development, the plan is basically set up or broken into these different parts. And the overarching project goal is to inform ACRD policy, specifically in the zoning bylaw and the OCP, the Alberni Valley OCPs, but of course there's multiple other policy documents that came into play. And then further mobilize community action, and of course for the ACRD to become recognized as an age-friendly community. So we started with some background research and really looking at, many different examples of age-friendly plans. There's been a lot of plans done in a lot of different local governments over the years. And as well, there's been a lot of federal and provincial government documents that have been produced, and as well as policy documents. So there's a lot of information out there that we definitely, looked at, because we did not want to recreate the wheel and we wanted to build upon those. So, and then of course some regional and local plans such as Ukilet's age-friendly plan or Tofino's age-friendly plan. And so we really built off of that important baseline that's already been set up. And then for the age-friendly framework, we really wanted to emphasize the importance of building age-friendly communities and promoting active living in the Burnie Valley. Part of the plan development also included an age-friendly assessment. And really this assessment was to see how the ACRD aligns with the 8 World Health Organization age-friendly themes, which I will go into detail on shortly. And these themes were used to inform like all aspects of the plan development. So really we looked at everything we were doing through an age-friendly lens per se. And then with the development of any planning document or any planning process, getting community input can sometimes be challenging, especially through COVID. But it turned out the community really quickly became invested in this plan. And they provided such important input and definitely a variety of methods. Again, I'll go into that more detail shortly. And lastly, and I think most importantly, the plan includes an actual age-friendly action plan. And it pulls, all the above parts together. And it's based on 10 age-friendly goals that were prioritized by the community. And that results in 12 priority, more short-term actions. So again, I'll go into the detail of those shortly. It's important to note that some other age-friendly plans that have been done or other age-friendly or other UBCM age-friendly funding has been used for just doing one task, such as just an assessment or just an action plan. We decided to sort of pack everything into one and to, because they're all connected. So this plan basically incorporates all of those. As well, it's important to note that our plan focuses on all 8 of the World Health Organization themes, as opposed to only focusing on a few. And as part of the age-friendly framework, really we tried to answer the question, why age-friendly? And so we included some background on various global, national, provincial initiatives. And really they're based on supporting healthy aging. And at the end of the day, it's important to know that all residents, so regardless of age or ability, will benefit from our community being more age-friendly. So here are the 8 World Health Organization age-friendly domains. And so they were developed in 2006 by the World Health Organization. And they're basically key areas of community life for which communities can, use as a guideline or use to imply that age-friendly lens as they're working on any age-friendly planning. And of course, they're also the basis of the UBCM grant funding. Part of the grant application asks, which one of these 8, or, will your plan involve all or whatnot? So our plan definitely incorporates all 8 of these. And this slide here, I'll go into more detail shortly, of course, but as I mentioned, one of the priorities is hopefully that the ACRD can join this list of the age-friendly recognized communities. And you might ask, why do that? What is the benefit of being an age-friendly community? And so basically it's bragging rights, but also, having that age-friendly BC recognition. Your achievements are promoted through BC Healthy Community publications, website newsletters, and then receiving, official recognition by the Public Health Agency of Canada, as well as the World Health Organization. So it would be wonderful to see the ACRD on that list in the future. The framework also included an outline for the responsibility to really protect and support seniors. Of course, because they're one of the most vulnerable populations and somewhat at high risk. Part of the framework speaks to the current, Burnie Valley response to the COVID pandemic and the importance of prioritizing the needs of seniors, especially around communication. That definitely came up as a very important aspect and something that community was very passionate about. And then lastly, it includes some best practices and as well as the role the local government can play in supporting the community becoming more age-friendly. I won't go into too much detail here, but it included a bit of a snapshot. So some key points from this slide are the largest age group in the Alberni or in the ACRD is those 45 to 64 years. So that makes up about 30% of the population. And that over the next 20 years, the greatest growth is predicted to be in the 75 plus age group. So that's essentially doubling from about 2,500 to about 5,000. Some very important stats that we considered early on and throughout the plan development. I don't expect you to read all of the information on this slide here, but I just put it into basically showed that the assessment included an analysis of the steps that the ACRD is currently taking around age friendliness. So really it looked at our examples of successes to date, a review of all of our current ACRD policy and documents, and that's of course with an age-friendly lens. So what we did is we took a checklist, an age-friendly checklist that was developed by the Government of Canada, which is focused on rural and remote communities. And different topics such as are listed there. You know, it looked at, you know, sidewalks, restrooms, parking, housing, you know, volunteering opportunities. And so what's listed in the small font you probably can't read is our actual ACRD planning documents and current policy that is in place right now. And then this slide here, of course, just shows you know, a very brief selection of current Alberni Valley age-friendly initiatives. If we were to list every single one or every single organization, the list would be huge. So that's something to definitely celebrate, that we have a lot of things that are already underway in the Alberni Valley. You know, the Sunshine Club, Elder College, you know, Lifeline. We're going to be working on the housing needs report. You know, the different activities that are currently taking place or on hold now, but, you know, pickleball at, you know, at the hall and that sort of thing. So there are definitely a lot of things to celebrate, but there's definitely room for improvement. And community engagement. Okay, I think community engagement definitely made up a huge or a large part of this age-friendly plan. So we spent 6 months doing community engagement from about December 2019 to May 2020. And some of the key engagement methods that we did were a bunch of different presentations, of course, the working group meetings, which turned out to be in person and then virtual. We did all of our prioritizing action planning virtually, and we participated in the Health Network Community Services Fair, and then had a wonderful community workshop in February with 40 very engaged attendees. And last but not least, I think it was just so wonderful to hear from, you know, 376 survey respondents. So we you know, got some great feedback that definitely formed the basis of the age-friendly plan. And then I just wanted to highlight, we spent a lot of time making sure that we really pushed this plan on social media. The city was great at supporting, pushing out the survey and advertising that on their, you know, social media networks, Facebook and Twitter. We did a mail out to all the households in Burnie Valley, and really got a really great response in community engagement. So I just wanted to highlight some of the key points from the age-friendly survey. And of course, all the survey results, or most of them, are included in the report and or the appendices. So it's important to note that, you know, 57% of the survey respondents were from the Alberni Valley electoral areas, whereas 44% were from the city. And I just wanted to note here too that we are able to, with the survey results, break it into, of course, overall, and then separate the Alberni Valley electoral areas from the city data. So as I mentioned in the report, we're happy to collaborate and share the city's data with them at a later time. And so 78% of respondents were over 55 years, half were retired, 65% were married, and 66% of respondents were female. And then this is a very important thing to consider here, is that when we ask people where they see themselves living in 10 years, overall 73% said in their own home, and a little bit higher in Alberni Valley's electoral areas with 76, and a little lower in the city with 70. But overall, most people see themselves living in their current house. And so that brings up a lot of questions around, as they age in place, who's going to provide their home maintenance, how are they going to get around, who's going to check on them. A lot of things come up that we needed to take into consideration. And then another important factor here is getting around. When we ask survey respondents how they get around for, shopping, medical appointments, and that sort of thing, almost 100% or 97% said they drive themselves. That's wonderful that they're able to drive themselves to these appointments, but what happens when they no longer have their driver's license or they're not physically able? So as Penny alluded to, talking about different transit options in the Alberni Valley, volunteer programs, that sort of thing. So those are some of the really key pieces that came up with the survey. So a few key findings in the community engagement. Of course, as I mentioned, a lot of people said there are definitely a lot of things to celebrate about living in the Alberni Valley. They love the easy access to nature, all the agricultural opportunities. There is, a lot of options for community participation and recreation, yet that could be improved on. And of course, considering the rural nature, people generally felt well serviced. There was issues related to community support and health, of course, lack of doctors and that sort of thing, transportation, as we mentioned, affordable housing, and a lot of comments around communication and information. And some primary concerns people had were, of course, declining health, losing independence, difficulty physically getting around, and then of course some financial stress with, not working and as well as wanting to stay in their own homes. So the action plan part of the age-friendly plan includes the following. So again, I mentioned that it is based around the 8 age-friendly themes from the World Health Organization. And out of those themes, the working group and the project team came up with 10 age-friendly goals, and those goals were prioritized by the community. And then it has some highlights of the different community perspectives related to each of the 8 age-friendly themes. So different quotes from the survey and different survey results, and then summarizes some of the key issues, which I touched on some of those. And then it has a number of proposed objectives, and then as well as a summary of future actions on how we are going to achieve those proposed objectives. And then last but not least, it has a list of 12 priority actions that I will go into in more detail in just a minute. And so the 12 priority age-friendly actions that are included in the plan, I'm not going to go through them all, but the point of these we're hopeful that it could have some somewhat immediate consideration for stakeholders, community members, as they work to collaboratively ensure that seniors are included, respected, supported to age well, and really can contribute through active participation as they live and age in the Alberni Valley. And so some things were a simple one like integrate the age-friendly action plan into ACRD staff work plans or maybe city plans, and form an age-friendly, permanent committee or, piggyback on one that's already established. Have an implementation and funding strategy. We talked about advocating for alternative transportation options, applying for different funding for, intergenerational hubs and that sort of thing. That idea came up a lot, the hub notion. People really were passionate about, pulling different ages together and different services together into one. And then a volunteer bank, a community resource directory, and there's something they're already working on, of course, is the housing needs assessment. And then just really promoting, things like the bench dedication program. And last but not least is supporting more cultural inclusion with local First Nations. And part of the 12 priority actions include short, medium, and long-term time frame, which is really important. And then they also include indicators so that we could actually see, our success and if we're, achieving these actions and how we're doing on them. And then it's important to note that we've indicated some suggested lead agencies or partners. And just because we've indicated that agency or partner, doesn't mean, or it may mean that it doesn't specifically fit within their current mandate. But the intent is, to provide guidance for hopeful future collaboration and discussion on how we can maybe fit that into their work plans or whatnot. So some summary and next steps. So really, we hope that this age-friendly plan responds to the needs of seniors, most importantly, and promoting the, the best possible quality of life in the Alberni Valley. And hopefully that it provides, the groundwork for these actions to keep Alberni Valley residents aging in place and really living in the Alberni Valley. So we don't see them moving to other places that are, more social or more closer to healthcare and that sort of thing. And then the actions will hopefully guide the development of, age-friendly policies, initiatives, built into our different documents. And then very importantly is, of course, enable us to apply for future funding. And when I say us, it doesn't just need to be the ACRD, but definitely collaborating to, apply for different UBCM funding, housing funding through CMHC or BC Housing, or there's also childcare funding that's available. And of course, we just recently completed, or the team recently completed, the ACRD childcare plan. So that's a very important document that we hope to sort of tie everything together. And then lastly, the poverty reduction plan will soon be underway. So it's hopeful that we could sort of come up with some sort of, expand on this hub model and really this intergenerational planning for all ages. And of course, we tried to make the recommendations, action-oriented and achievable, something we can do right away. And then I touched on this briefly. Community collaboration, really, it's something to be celebrated, and I feel very proud of the community support that we have already have for the plan, and as well as the many conversations I've had with many different people around the community. They really are invested already in becoming, leaders and or collaborating to make sure this plan, goes somewhere. There's a quote there, someone mentioned, to collaborate to move all the actions forward would truly make our community a leader for many others. And this awareness that this plan will benefit all ages and abilities. And just two examples here of community collaboration. The Island Health played a very key role in this plan development. They sent, a lot of staff to the working group, our workshop, and that sort of thing. So they're very invested in it. And the manager there, I spoke to her just last week or whatnot. She said she's very grateful for the plan. It aligns so well with her strategic framework. And it's actually going to help her advocate for future position or staffing within our region here. And she's already committed to making it a priority to implement the actions, and that they're, committed to seeing this through. Another example is the Elder College at North Island College. They have interested in participating in a future committee, and of course, working together to increase intergenerational programming, education and supporting seniors. And most importantly, I think that it's just that many Alberni Valley seniors, not on the working group, just, everyday residents have already expressed gratitude, for this plan, and they are willing to collaborate. So I hope that we can, take them up on that and work through this. I've listed here, it's a lot of words on the screen, I know, but basically it's a summary of what the recommendations that we're asking, which lead to somewhat of an implementation. So we're hoping today that the board endorses this plan and, highlight, which includes the vision there on the screen. And that really we would hope that the ACRD, participates and supports and promotes and really works towards becoming an age-friendly community. And we hope that the board would direct staff to explore options, to develop this stakeholder advisory committee, or more importantly, partner with an existing one. And then lastly, I've said it multiple times throughout, I really hope that staff are able to apply for the next step and, become an age-friendly recognized community. And in order to do that, we needed to have done an action plan. So that is what this document is here today. And so lastly, once the board hopefully endorse this plan, we'll work to publicize it, of course, on the Facebook page, reach out to the city, our different member municipalities, and hopefully get that published. We've had lots of requests for community presentations already, although this is recorded, so it'll be great because I can share that. And then, of course, continued collaboration, and really, and very importantly, is an implementation plan and as well as a funding strategy. So sorry that was a lot of information packed into one presentation. I tried to be as concise as possible, but yeah, so I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. Just on the first face of it, it seems like there may be an opportunity for the age-friendly plan to, and the folks who worked on it, to have some input on our community recovery, path to recovery document for post-COVID. So comments? I have Director Cote and then Director Shannon.
Thank you. Just like to, through the chair to Amy, thank you for this. It's a great document. It gives us a really good direction for our age-friendly planning for our communities. So just say thank you, really great job. I know that the Health Network is going to appreciate the work that's been put into this, as well as staff at the regional district for implementing with our OCPs. I think that you've done a great job and appreciate it. And I can't wait to share it with my community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Director Shannon?
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Amy for all her work on this. I know it's been months and just great job. Thank you.
Okay, Director Osborne and then Director Haggard and then back to Director Cote.
Thanks. Not to sound too much like a broken record, but I really do want to say to Amy and everybody who worked on this, congratulations. I really think this is a piece of work that the regional district can feel really, really proud of. And I want to, you know, as having one in our community in the district of Tofino, I can't believe how much it comes up and how much we refer back to our age-friendly plan and how informative it's been in strategic planning for the municipality, in everything from OCP renewal to tourism master plans and all kinds of things. And this is a really foundational document. And I just want to say congratulations again and thank staff so much for this. Thank you.
I'm on mute, sorry. Director Haggard and then Director Cote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Amy, I can just feel your passion when you're talking about this. So great job. It was really a good read. I enjoyed it. One question though, I thought age-friendly was more inclusive, but I felt that this age-friendly was more geared towards seniors without any youth component. Can you just maybe comment on that, please? Thank you.
I think when it came down to the funding requirements and the UBCM application, we did have you have to pick some age group to start with. So we definitely, and most other places that have done age-friendly plans do have picked 55 plus, and so that's the category that we decided to focus on. But of course, if you think about it, if something's wheelchair friendly, then it's friendly for a baby and stroller and that sort of thing. So we could have gone into more detail and broken it down and, use less of the 55 plus wording. But I think for the sake of the grant requirements, we really needed to focus on, that age group. But I think as we move forward, that's a good thing that you brought up. That's something that we need to consider, that going to more towards, age friendly, whereas, for all and not just focusing on the 55 plus age group. So good point that you brought that up.
Great. Thank you, Amy.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Cote.
Thank you. I'd like to make the motion then. That's appropriate.
Okay, I think we have 4 motions. So the first motion moved by Director Cote.
Okay, that the Board of Directors endorse the Alberni Valley Age-Friendly Plan and appendices, and as presented, highlighting the vision statement to ensure seniors in the Alberni Valley are included, respected, and supported to age well, and to contribute through the active participation in their community.
Great. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Shannon. Any further comments? I really like that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay.
You want me to keep going?
If you'd like, yeah.
That the motion that the ACRD actively participates, supports, promotes, and works toward becoming an age-friendly community through the implementation of the Alberni Valley Age-Friendly Plan, and that plan implementation be referred to the board strategic planning process.
Sounds great. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Cole. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried.
I'd move that the Board of Directors direct staff to explore options to establish a new age-friendly stakeholder advisory committee or partner with an existing established committee.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Cole. Director Cote, do you have a preference in regards to whether it would be a new committee or piggybacking?
I think we'd have to find one
Okay.
that's appropriate. This leaves the option to do either.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried.
Finally, that the Board of Directors direct staff to apply for age-friendly BC community recognition from the province of BC and BC Healthy Communities.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Dr. Shannon. Comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, thank you for that. And thank you, Amy, for your work. And this is not the last you'll see of us. Or us you, I suppose. Thank you again. Okay, item 10.1, staff reports. Would anyone like to pull anything out of staff reports? Probably another half hour, Dr. Shannon. Okay. Director Beckett, please go ahead.
Yeah, just aware that I think we're looking for a verbal report from Heather on item D.
Yes. Sorry, Heather, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm going to do a bit of a EOC update, but I'm going to start with some more provincial announcement because Premier Horgan and Dr. Henry did an announcement at 12:45 today. I'm not sure if you've all heard the announcement, so I want to just start with that. They announced this afternoon that we're moving slowly into phase 3. So this means the reopening of resorts, hotels, lodges, the film industry, movie theaters, and allows for travel within the province. Dr. Henry really emphasized respectful travel. Do your research, make sure the community that you're going to visit is welcoming visitors. Appreciate that some smaller communities do still have some concerns. They emphasize that this is not a return to normal. The same advice that they've been giving all along still applies. Continue with physical distancing. When you can't do that, consider wearing a mask, wash your hands, stay home when you're sick, and spend time in small groups and in open spaces. One of the other things they mentioned that I hadn't heard before is to keep track of who you are in contact with. That will help with contact tracing in the event that there is a COVID outbreak or somebody in your community has it. The Premier stated that this is not the time for the large family reunion that people often do in the summers. The province has extended the provincial state of emergency until July 7th, so that's for another couple weeks. There is one active case in the Vancouver Island Health Authority, which was announced earlier this week, and prior to that, it was early May when we saw our last case. So on a more local level, our EOC remains open at level 1, and we are in a monitoring phase. The funding that we had been receiving from the province will end at the end of June, with the exception of the funding that we're receiving for the shower facility that the city and Canadian Mental Health Association are operating for the vulnerable population. So this funding is approved until July 24th or until the provincial state of emergency ends. The other funding that we received for advertisements in the local paper, on the radio, as well as the mileage for the food delivery program in the community has all ended. So given this loss in funding, we met earlier this week as a policy group, which consists of Mayor Minions, Chair Jack, the 2 CAOs from the city and the regional district, and myself. And we discussed, given that our funding is ending, what does that look like for our EOC moving forward? So we have made a decision to pull back on certain communications, the ones that are, costing us money. So the radio interviews, Mayor Minions as our spokesperson is doing her last interview tomorrow with Dr. Shane Longman. And we're going to end our regularly scheduled Facebook Live events, and we will restart or use videos in the event that second wave does impact our area. We will end the newspaper ads and radio ads as of next week, because those are no longer funded. The sandwich boards have been updated or will be updated shortly to remove the reference to the open burning ban, as that has been lifted. We had our Path to Recovery stakeholder meeting yesterday afternoon. We had over 20 participants. We've developed a survey to gather input and guide the recovery process for the regional district. The survey is open now, and it's in effect until July 5th, and we're asking the stakeholders who participated yesterday to take the survey, but we're also opening the survey to the general public. You will all receive an email with the link to the survey, so you can take it and share it with your communities. It's also posted on our website, as well as letsconnectpa.ca. The results of the survey will be presented to the community recovery team on July 16th, and then any recommendations that come out of that group will come to the board for the July meeting. And that is about it for my update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Director Coates and then Director Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Was there, in the announcement, was there any direction of how many people can be gathered together in phase 3? I'm sorry if it's right out there and easy to find, but I was...
Yeah, from what I heard, there was no change in the order, so I think the cap is still at 50. But Dr. Henry, was really encouraging people to keep it as small as you need to.
Excellent, thank you so much.
Okay, please go ahead, Director Roberts, and then Director Haggard.
Yeah, just a comment and a request from Heather. Is there any information that you want to discuss or advise the rest of the directors with regards to our chat with and meeting with Sybil Sanderson?
Sure. So earlier this week, we met with the Long Beach electoral area community, some representatives from District of Ukiah, District of Tofino, to work on our emergency plan for the Long Beach area. So that was a kickoff meeting to gather interest. It was very well attended by residents of Salmon Beach, Port Albion, Millstream area. And we're going to continue on moving forward so that we can get a proper emergency plan for the Long Beach electoral area.
Great, thank you. And then, I'm sorry, I just gapped. Who's next? Sorry, go ahead, Director Haggard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heather, I'm very happy that we're starting to have visitors. I know it's very important for our tourism, and I don't mind people from other provinces coming over, but we're finding it very concerning at the number of license plates from different states in the United States that are in our community, and they have surfboards on the top of their vehicles. So I wonder where they're going to. When we see these kind of vehicles that are obviously from out of country, and I don't know how they're getting through the border, but is there a place that we can report them, just to do a check to make sure they've come through the border legally? Or what, do you know what the process is for that?
I actually don't. Would anybody else know?
Director Osborne.
Thanks. Let me work backwards. So first of all, if anybody knows of a person who you probably through their place of accommodation has come up from the States, and you hear that they are telling border officials that they're going through and they're not, you should call the RCMP and they will take care of it. And that's kind of how it happened, I believe, in Banff. Also on the subject of different license plates, today I learned how there are some car rental companies where British Columbians are actually renting cars and going to other places in British Columbia, but those car rental companies have licensed and insured their vehicles in the States. So for example, a car here in Tofino that had Indiana plates was not actually from Indiana, it was actually British Columbians traveling. So I just want to say that I think it's really important to ask questions and not to jump to conclusions. And but I hear what you're saying about the surfboards. The announcement today about going into phase 3 is really positive news from my perspective. I know that the communities of Tofino and Ucluelet are open and welcoming visitors. We have been waiting for this announcement, and all of the businesses are doing really well with very responsible business practices. And I wanted to directly address the First Nations issues and the Nechalath Tribal Council's release, and to say that we have met with Tlaloquit, with the Howzit, and with Heshquit leadership. And so we understand, and I feel very confident in saying that the municipality of Tofino is open, and that this is essentially blessed by the Tlaloquit Nation in whose territory we are, but that the Heshquit and Howzit nations are asking that non-essential travel still not come to their territories. And so we're working with them, and that obviously is difficult for some businesses who rely on those territories for kayaking and whale watching and things like that. But I think it's really important to acknowledge the concerns that have been expressed and to continue to work with the leadership. And that's exactly the approach that we're taking. And this is the messaging that I'll be giving very publicly in the next few days. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. That's important to note. I have Director Roberts. Did I miss anyone? Okay, Director Roberts, please go ahead. Oh, and Director Cote.
Yeah, thanks for that. With regards to U.S. citizens coming up here, and if you're seeing these U.S. plates, and I understand what Mayor Osborne is saying, they may be Canadian citizens, but the only allowable crossing of the border from U.S. citizens is if they are going to Alaska directly. And we know from past experience, as happened in Banff, that that's not the case. So there may be U.S. citizens coming up here to go surfboarding. And with regards to Director or to Alderperson Haggard's comment, yeah, I think perhaps that you know, if they're coming across the border and representing themselves as being going to Alaska, I don't know too many surfing spots in Alaska that they'd be going up that far to surf. So anyway. Yeah, that's my comment. You know, if there's a real concern or issue, then I think the RCMP should be notified. And thanks for that.
Thank you for that. Next up, I have Director Cote.
Well, thank you. Just through the chair, I'd like to say thank you to Heather. It sounds like this might be our last review of what's happening for updates for quite a while. Just like to say that Sprout Lake is opening up slowly. This is good news because we want people to be able to recreate and enjoy the lake and facilities that are here. We have one restaurant that's opening next week, I believe. So houseboats are being rented. I've been out a couple times in my boat, just touring around and seeing what the population is out there, and it seems to be not that busy yet. So I'm hoping that will continue, and everybody will remain respectful. I'm disappointed that the Marine Patrol couldn't be working this year, but I'll be trying to contact the RCMP and the Coast Guard and ask them to maybe make weekly tours of the lake between them, just to have some presence out here. And thank you, Heather, for all that you've done for us, and look forward to the new sign. Thanks.
Thanks. Director Roberts, please.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate Director Cote's comment to Heather. Thanks very much for all your hard work, and very much appreciated. Look forward to working with you in the future with regards to the emergency operations over on the West Coast, and enjoy your holiday. Cheers.
Okay, great words. Thank you for that. Are there any other comments? And if not, we can have a motion to receive all the reports. Thank you, Director Roberts. So moved. Do we have a seconder? Director Shannon? Yeah. Okay. Any further comment? Seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay. All right, that brings us to committee reports, and we have a special verbal report from Director Cote from today's electoral area directors meeting, which I partially caught online, which was great.
Thank you. Today's electoral area directors meeting, we had a report on the Community Work Funds Project 2020 and made motion to approve the amendment to align responsibilities and procedures with the ACRD financing planning process. That'll give us the ability to review that before we have to go into budget. We also received an update on rural planning and building inspection. It is a busy year, so staff are managing through the COVID and looking forward to more building in our communities. Also received a report on bylaw options for enforcements and fines. So June 10th, we approved bylaw PS 1008, going forward with zoning infractions. And we'll be reviewing that in 6 months to see how we're making out, because this is a new process that we're going through. We'll at that time take a look at our other bylaws and see what needs to be updated. There's a few that do, others that we can include at that time for ticketing for infractions. But sounds like staff are aligning to get this all going. So that would be my report.
Thank you for that. Do we have any comments or questions? Seeing none, could we get a motion to receive the report, please? Thank you, Director Shannon, seconded by Director Roberts. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, that brings us to 10.3 member reports. First up is 9.11 911 Corporation. Please go ahead, Director McNabb.
So our 911 meeting is actually in person on Friday. So I'll have a report after that. That is from some of the graphs that I see in the agenda. It appears that the 911 calls for service have dramatically dropped off due to COVID. So I'll double check that and get back to you on it.
Thank you. Vancouver Island Regional Library, Director Cote.
Thank you. Just like to say that the Port Alberni Library is open now. So people are able to take books out again. Tofino and Ucluelet libraries are not open at this point. And those are the three libraries that feed the rural area with library services. There's a lot of people in the communities that Bureau Service supports that have been waiting for the libraries to reopen. So it's not fast enough for some. And that's my report.
Thank you for that. Next up is the AV Chamber of Commerce. Director Minions.
No report. There is a meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Air Quality Council, Director Bodner, and just a quick overview, please.
Yes, our meeting was supposed to be tomorrow, and because of a physical illness, she has canceled the meeting, Anna Lewis. So just a few things that she wanted to highlight was that there was 2 wood stove exchanges to date, and she is working on the Airways Legacy for Health to create a provincial public survey regarding wildfire smoke.
Okay, great. Next up is the West Coast Aquatic Board, Director Osborne.
I have nothing to update. Thank you.
Okay. AVICC, Director Cote.
We had a meeting last week, discussed our convention that will be piggybacking on UBCM. So it'll be a virtual convention. We haven't done any details yet, but it should be short, and I believe it will be pre-UBCM. That's my report.
Okay. Next up is the Beaver Creek Water Advisory Committee. Director McNabb.
No, it's been trickling along. We're fine at the moment, so no meeting.
Okay. And the West Island Woodlands Advisory Group, same.
So our last meeting was May 28th, and this is what we received. So which page would you like me to start on?
Page 4.
So it was the actual audit report from Western Forest Products, and it was 3.5 hours long. It was interesting, and they basically described all the things that they were in compliance with, and there were 3 that they were not, which one of them that is sort of the most problematic is they had logged too close to a number of streams, and so that was something they were going to discuss with the engineers and give them a boot and correct the problem. So it's been a different year for them because of the strike and COVID. So I don't think we can weigh this year against others and as an example. Thanks.
Great, thank you for that. And the last is other reports, Clydequit Biosphere Trust. Is that Director Osborne, or is that just a general report?
Well, it's not me specifically, but I mean, it's the annual report that they are submitting to all local governments.
Okay. Okay, so does anyone have any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Director Cote.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask Director McNabb, all that paper, he must have shares in the forestry, or are they?
Yeah.
I'd like to say with the forestry, though, I did receive an email from Mosaic, Pam, forget her last name, asking if I wanted to have a virtual meeting to discuss forestry in our area. So, and I'm sure that she'll be reaching out to other directors that forestry is in their areas as well. So I'd like to do that. I'll be replying back to her and include staff to let them know I'm doing that. Thanks.
Sounds familiar, Director Shannon? Yeah. Same.
Sorry, I was on. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I received an email from Pam Jorgensen too. Thanks.
Okay. I couldn't remember her name either. Okay, that's great. Any further comments? Shall we receive the reports? Director Roberts, seconded by Director Shannon. Okay, any further comments? Last chance. Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Great. So that brings us to questions period. Is Elena still here, or? No, she's not. Did we receive any questions on the responses?
Mr. Chair, no, we did not receive any questions or comments with respect to this agenda today from the public.
Okay, great. So that brings us to going in camera.